Hey everybody, John Gucci Foley here. Welcome back to the High Performance Zone. Today I have Bill, I like to call him Impact Berman. He is one of the top executive coaches in the world. I learned a lot in this about not only coaching, but organizations and development. We dive into the military, this idea of command and control versus giving out the responsibility to the boots on the ground, where that came from, even hundreds of years ago in different countries and different assets, but more importantly, how that ties back to the corporate world. And especially with COVID, we talk about VUCA and some other cool things. But most of all, this is going to be really deep in self-awareness. What does a coach do for you? How does a coach take you and help you with your strengths, but also helps with your weaknesses? So I enjoyed this a ton. You'll get a lot out of it. Make sure you go to the end. If you don't listen all at once, skip to the end. We really finish in a bang. And with that, enjoy it. Ready, hit it. Gucci out. Hey, Bill, welcome to the High Performance Zone. You know, Sugar, my producer, likes to call you Bill Impact Berman. And that's because you wrote a book called Influence and Impact. And we're going to dive into that. But I just wanted to say welcome. You've got a wealth of experience. We're going to dive in. And my first question is this idea of the fifth discipline. Talk to me about what does that mean? And why did you focus on that?
So the whole basis of the fifth discipline, which is a book that was written probably 25 years ago, 30 years ago now, is about how to build a learning organization. And, you know, organizations for most of the 20th century were not learning organizations. They were production organizations. It was all about producing the most stuff at the least cost in the quickest time. But with the knowledge economy growing, you have to have an organization that can grow and respond and shift gears to the current situation. And so building the fifth discipline was learning. Got it. And that's where that whole concept comes from.
Man, I love that we started there. Honestly, I didn't know that's what it was, because I believe it's so important. And one of the things we did on the Blue Angels is we were a learning organization out of necessity, right? I don't know if you knew this, but we turn over half of our leadership every year. So half of those 6 pilots up there are new, okay?
Wow.
And listen to this then. And then a third of all my support team. So 33% of my organization is new every year. Now that's by choice. That's not turnover. It's rotation because the Blue Angels are part of Navy and basically you get a new job every 3 years. But what it forced us to do was to be a learning, growing, training organization because we're in a constant state of change and not just people, right? Because we're all over the world, we're in different cities, different weather, all that kind of stuff. So it's a phenomenal model of how do you actually sustain excellence under change, right? Give me your comment. You have, so that everybody knows, by the way, we'll dive into your background. Sure. Not only Harvard, Ph.D. at Yale. I can't wait to bug you on that because I went to Stanford. But the idea of you've had such a great impact on people's, and you've coached and you've led organizations through change, and we talk about organizations in crisis. So there's so many things we're going to dive into. But since we started with the learning organization, what hit you when I talked about the Blue Angels?
Well, a couple of things. I mean, the military to me is fascinating. I've been reading about some military, the military's approach to leadership for like 10, 15 years. And one of the things that's always intrigued me is the debate and the move back and forth between command and control and mission tactics.
Nice.
And so it's the whole delegation of authority to command and control and how that evolved and how it switched back and forth. And I think, you know, in the Blue Angels, you can't have your boss, you can't, like, if you're in a situation, you can't get on the phone and go, hey, what do you think I should do? And then that person, you know, talks to somebody else who talks to somebody else who comes back to you and says, oh, by now you're dead. So they have to delegate authority to you. You have enormous operational authority on the ground, in the air, because that's the only choice you have. In organizations, in corporations, particularly when a corporation's under stress, the normal response of most people is not to say, go do what you do best. It's to say, I'm in control. It's the Andrew Haig kind of scenario where it's you try to assert authority over something. It doesn't work anymore. That's not how the world operates anymore. If I run a company, it's just as likely that a quarter of my staff is in Hyderabad, a quarter of my staff is on the West Coast, and I've got people in Germany and Tokyo, right? And so if they don't want to talk to me, if they don't want to listen to me, they don't have to. They can just say, oh, never saw your email. So it's, so you have to get people online, you have to get them aligned, and you have to get them focused on doing what you believe is the mission, what you have to accomplish. And so it's all about bringing people along with you.
I love it. I like to say you got to connect, align, and commit, right? So first, the connection has to occur. Human beings, whatever. Like right now, we're connecting. I got to know you a little bit right before we jumped on the thing. But then we got to get in alignment, especially as an organization or in this podcast, whatever. And then there's commitments because you got to execute on whatever the heck you align on, right? Tell me more about, I want to get into the organizations that you've worked with, and because you've seen so many of these things, right? But you really intrigued me when you said you've done a lot of studying about the military and how it goes back and forth. So educate me, and our audience on what did your research show you, and then I'll give you some anecdotal experiences I had. But what did you learn?
So the military has struggled for well over 100 years about how best to run an organization of that size and structure and complexity.
Which is like a major corporation, right? If you think about it.
Walmart is about the same size as the US military, okay, right? Great. They're both about 1.5 million, 2 million people.
Got it.
So yeah, there's a real equivalency there. And in some cases, at some periods of time, people have been very command and control. Do what I say, follow what I do. If it doesn't fit into the model, you push it up the chain, and then the chain goes to that chain, goes to that chain, goes to that chain, and then comes back.
Well, where did you find that? Because it varies, right? So what was your research showing you? Is there a timeline? Did it vary?
There was, actually the Prussian military in the late 19th century was very much into this whole notion of mission tactics, or what they called Auftragtaktik, which is this idea of you educate your team about the mission, and you educate them so well, and you get them so inculcated into those ideas that they know exactly what they're doing and they know how to respond to it. It actually goes back. I think it goes back to Admiral Perry. Actually, when he went to open up Japan, I think it was Perry who went to open up Japan.
It was.
I mean, there was no way to communicate. The mission was open up Japan, do what you got to do, and let me know when come back when you've succeeded. And so it was completely delegated to him.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. That's why we'll keep going in this. The Navy still has that in its culture. And I think it started because of what you said, Admiral Perry, but really any ship captain. They were given orders or missions, but once they left the shore, there wasn't communication back then, right? We didn't have sat navs, and we didn't have cell phones. And so you had to trust that person. And because of that, I just got goosebumps, because that has still continued even with all the communication stuff we have. A Navy ship captain or an admiral or a battle group out at sea has much more autonomy in decision-making than normal, let's say, on the ground forces. And so keep going, because I think
in Vietnam, there was a period of time where the communication technology had really improved, and there was as the Vietnam War went on, this is what I read, is they moved into a real command and control sort of model. And then they realized that wasn't working at all. And it sort of blew up. And then they sort of started delegating authority down to the people who had operational information. And so it was really that but there were literally, from what I read, commanders in helicopters trying to grab information and tell people, go here, go there, go there. and it completely failed. As you can imagine, it would. But this is critical in corporate settings, in large organizations, because you sometimes see, these stellar CEOs who have huge brains and great strategic and operational skills that really are better than some of the people around them. Mm-hmm. But as a result, nobody can make a decision. Mm-hmm. And so everything gets pushed up to the top, which slows things down. It depletes innovation. It depletes motivation. And people just start, mailing it in. So you can't, and then those organizations invariably fail when that one charismatic or, inspirational leader leaves. So it's, it'll work for a period of time. But like Lee Iacocca, it worked for a while, or Jack Welch. But when they go, it falls apart because the people can't follow that. So what we're trying to build are sustainable organizations, ones that can go forward without having one person saying, here's the answer.
Okay. Yeah. This has been awesome because, as you and I both know, they've been talking about this for a long time: organizational development, flat structures, matrix, all that versus the command and control. What have you actually seen? Can you give me some examples of maybe even a case study of companies that actually do it really well, this new structure that you're proposing?
So I think the answer is there are more pockets of this in organizations than organizations that are really good at it. Actually, so I work in a couple of quantitative hedge funds.
Oh, do you? Okay, good.
Yeah. And they're doing a very good job of delegating authority and responsibility to the team members. So the people at the most senior level understand that they can't do trading, they can't build models, they can't make decisions based on, the information on the ground, because they don't have the information on the ground. Yeah. They were challenged by this, by the way, when COVID hit, because most of the trading models they had, most of the work they didn't fit with what happened to the economy during the beginnings of COVID. And so their computer models didn't hold up. But the answer wasn't for the CEO to take control. The answer was to put people on it who know what they're doing and who can respond to the situation in the moment and deal with it. And most of them did a very good job of that. I was very impressed with how they handled that. A couple of them struggled for a while, but they ended up doing the right thing.
I'm glad you go ahead.
I was going to say there are a couple of others that I see where it's really the other way around. And part of my job and my team's job has been to help those organizations shift gears and stop being such command and control organizations. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we've had success, sometimes we haven't. It's really tough.
What, as you were talking, I started to think about COVID being, any shock to the system, right? They talk about shocks, the oil crisis, yep. Whatever, 9/11 shocks, right? And COVID was obviously a shock to the system. In your studies and in your experiences, looking back now, right? Can you pull out any lessons learned, learning organization kind of things? What have you deduced from this?
I think the most important thing that I've learned is that you actually, I've redefined VUCA.
Oh, good. Tell me that.
VUCA refers to volatile, uncertain,
complex,
ambiguous. And ambiguous.
Got it.
I think we ought to have a VUCA 2.0.
Okay.
Which is versatile. I can't remember what I did.
Uncertain to the opposite.
Courageous, versatile, something courageous, and adaptable.
There you go.
And, it's about because what a leader needs to do is they have to be flexible enough to adapt to constantly changing environmental situations, whether it's financial or cultural or organizational, if you try to maintain the sort of stability and consistency that we've had during most of the 20th century, we're not going to survive because we're no longer in that world. The world, because of technology, is constantly changing. Because of the interconnectedness of the globe. Technology is, organizations are constantly changing and having to deal with all kinds of changes that happen. So, supply chain shifts that happen 10,000 miles away are affecting how your company operates. And if you don't have a flexible system with redundancies built in, it's not going to work.
Well, interesting enough, I was with Ashley Furniture just yesterday, working with them, and you can imagine the supply chain challenges that we've all had with Asia, Vietnam right now. So Vietnam, locking down. And so a lot of that is affecting the furniture companies, right? And they've been thinking through it. But I love what you said about VUCA. For most people, I'm not sure they understand that term. So that was a military term. It came out of the Army War College couple decades ago now.
Yep. And it got totally sucked up by American corporate culture. So people love that concept.
Yeah.
So the notion is that in the fog of war, or similar combat situations, there's a lot of ambiguity and unpredictability and a very changing plan and landscape. And corporate America has adopted that as a way to manage exactly what we're talking about here. For some corporations, it's turned out to be an excuse for not creating a strategy, which is not what you're supposed to do. But it's a message of how the fundamental message is, how do you deal with that ambiguity and that lack of predictability in an organization and a culture, and how do you build a culture that can withstand that level of instability?
Well, and I love where you're going. It's not the old VUCA. It is VUCA 2.0, I believe strongly. And that is, okay, that's fine. That's the situation, but that's not how I'm going to lead through it. I'm actually going to do what you're saying. Right. Okay. I'm going to take the positive approach. I like to do that. I don't know if you had a chance to glance at my book called Fearless Success, but I got a framework in there. Right. And it basically, what I did with that was take kind of what you're saying, the old strategic management theory of vision, plan, execute, feedback loop. We all know that it works really well. And I said, okay, that works well. Most people, by the way, the weakest link is the feedback loop in corporate America and life, right? And then you got entrepreneurial companies that do the visioning real well, and they execute fast because they can. And then but they're not really good on process or structure, and they need some help there. And then because they can't scale. And then you got companies that they're so ingrained in process and structure, they've lost their speed, their decision making, their adaptability. But I like to talk about beliefs and not just vision, right? Commitment and buy-in to a vision. And this idea of preparation, not just planning, but actually prepared, focused, and aligned, right? And we talked about aligned earlier. The ability to execute, but through high trust contracts. So it's just what you and I are talking about. It's not like I got to call you and get an answer. It's, okay, we got a trust contract, and you just execute on that trust contract. But the key, it just goes back to the way we started, is, do you have a learning loop? Do you have a mechanism? Do you have a way where you're actually learning and transferring those learnings, which I call the glad to be here debrief, this debrief process? Anything in that model that just struck your head?
So when you said feedback loops, I thought, you know what, you got to talk to a guy named Eduardo Salas.
Oh, really?
He's a psychologist researcher at Rice University in Houston.
Okay.
And he spent the past 30 years researching high-performing team, working with NASA, working with parts of the military, working with some other groups. He's one of the people who's helping the Mars team sort of build, become a high-performing team. And one of the most critical elements he talks about in a high-performing team is that constant feedback loop. Is after action reviews, is the ability to go back and say, okay, what did we do? How do we do it better? Not blaming, not pointing the finger culture, but how do we make it better? How do we get it where we need it to be? and part of that is so that we don't have to talk that much, because we know each other, we know how we think, we know how we operate. So, one of the interesting lessons that people have learned about high performing team is they don't spend a ton of time communicating, at least not when they're in operational mode, because they did a lot of prep work up ahead. Yeah. One of the challenges in corporate America is there aren't a lot of opportunities to practice. It's, you're the idea that I would do something as a rehearsal for something else is seen as a waste of time. And I think it's unfortunate, because I think that one of the things I've learned from watching the military, watching sports, watching other high performance, is that the ability to practice and be able to anticipate what's going to happen has a huge impact on how you perform under pressure.
Beautiful. Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. I mean, I think back to, the Blue Angels, we were the epitome of that. Top Gun does a pretty good job too. The military does a pretty good job, but the Blue Angels were incredible. And the amount of time that we put in our preparation, but we had a flight. It's typically 37 minutes, right? We'll brief for an hour and a half in very minute detail every day. I mean, it's not like, okay, you just did it once and okay, everyone knows the plan. We know the sequence. We know our responsibilities. We know our expectations, the SOPs there. Of course, all that stuff is basic. It's not basic in business. It should be fundamentals, right? But usually it's there. But what we did is we rehearsed that right before, and just what you said, the communication airborne was very short, very succinct, and because we didn't need a lot of it. And so I love your point.
Well, you lived what I read about and studied. So it's, but it was your lived reality. So I'm sure you understand this intuitively.
Well, that's, the beautiful part, I got to be honest with you, Bill, is, I never plan on doing what I'm doing now, which is, we're out there in the organizational world, really more large inspirational talks and stuff like that. But I never planned on doing it. And my path was a little bit opposite. I didn't do the research and then write a book and do all the case studies. I actually was thrown into it by by just the way it was. And then I just kept, the military is pretty good. At least I believe they'll give you opportunity. As long as you're ready to step up, there's, you can keep going. You can get to SEAL Team 6. It's not just about being a SEAL. There's pecking orders within that. Same thing in the Blues, right? And as long as you're willing and you're a team player and you want to grow and learn, the opportunity's there. You gotta deliver when you get the opportunity, when the time. But I just reversed engineered. I did exactly what you said. I went, holy crap, I live this every single day. Then I went to Stanford to the business school, and I'm starting to hear this, really brilliant philosophies and brilliant. I mean, I couldn't believe how smart my professors were, but not even the professors, the other students. I learned more from the students than the professors, right? And I'm sitting there going, wow, this is amazing. But the light bulbs are going off in reverse order. I was reverse engineering going, well, I know how it works, but why did it work? And how do you replicate it? So it's kind of cool. That's why I think what we're doing is I'm learning from you right now, and I think everybody on this call is. That's
the, there's an interesting concept in psychology called growth mindset.
Oh, yes.
Do you know Carol Dweck's stuff?
Yeah, well, I've met her on the circuit, but I don't know her real well. But yeah, she's got great stuff. Absolutely.
And the whole concept of a growth mindset, of being able to think about the experience as something that you learn and grow by, rather than thinking about, when somebody says, hey, you could have done that better, thinking like, oh, I failed, or there's something wrong with me, or I can't change. It's I get so mad at people when they talk about you can't teach old dogs new tricks. Because I'm an old dog and I'm learning stuff new every day.
I don't think you're an old dog. That's a good segue. But tell me and my audience a little bit about your background and really, what's important to you. I mean, how did you get to where you are today? Which, by the way, one of the top coaches, top organizational leaders out there doing amazing work, and everyone's got to get your new book. Okay, Influence and Impact. I know that only just got out there since June, and it's crushing it, right? So we'll make sure that this link goes out. Everybody knows how to get it. But give me your story. How did you get where you are?
So I'll give you the short version of a long and winding story. So I've had 3.5 careers. Nice. my first half career, I was a chef on Cape Cod when I was in college.
Nice.
And
what restaurant? Where were you?
It was called, well, it's long gone, but it was called the Mediterranean. It was in North Truro, and I was apparently there at the same time, the same year that Anthony Bourdain was in Provincetown, which was interesting. Anyway, loved it, had a blast, was working 70 hours a week. You know, we'd finish up and we'd go to the bar and spend a couple hours at the bar, fall asleep, come back, go to work the next, you know. But I realized, like, if I wanted any kind of life at all, that being a chef was a bad idea. So I went to grad school instead, became a clinical psychologist, still cook, by the way, but became a clinical psychologist, and I was going to do psychotherapy, and I was going to treat patients, and I was going to do research, and I was going to teach, you know, which a good psychologist. And I did that for 7-8 years, and 9 years, until I had my second child. And I realized that I wasn't going to be able to pay for college for my kids doing what I was doing. So I started a consulting firm, which didn't do well, but my partner and I built software because of that. And people wanted to buy our software. So I became a software entrepreneur. Nice. Grew my software company, did it for part of the time while I was an academic, did it part of the time full-time, and grew it. I won't go into the details, but it did reasonably well. Not Google, not Facebook, but and I sold it to a healthcare information system company, and then ran their professional services group. So it was a group that became about a third of their revenue. Oh, wow. And did that for 4 years and left. It was the company shrunk due to a .com related things falling apart. So this was 2004.
Yeah.
And
so just a segue, I was a VC after Stanford. I went to Stanford in '97, Sloan Fellowship, and out of there, I got into the VC world, which I knew nothing about. And we were the early stage technology, you know, right there on California Avenue, right in San Francisco, when bam, that bubble hit. And I got to tell you, it was well above my pay grade. I didn't know what happened, but it was, you know, how are you going to react to that, right? That's the key, but go ahead.
Absolutely. And figure out what I was going to do next. And he said, well, what about this thing, executive coaching? I didn't know what it was. So I went and found out what it was and thought that was a good idea, and started doing it. Started working with a couple of really special people who were willing to take a chance on me. Didn't know me and knew I hadn't done this before, but they figured I was smart and could learn quickly. Yeah. And I started doing this. So I started in 2005 and been doing it ever since.
You know, I'm so glad we segued that, because I just started coaching. I had my first client, 2 weeks ago.
Good for you.
Yeah, so you can help me, right? And help him and many other people. But tell my audience, because I'm not sure everybody knows, what is an executive coach? And how do you become, which you are, which is your, what's the organization?
So I'm not a certified coach by the Institute, the International Coaching Federation.
Okay.
There's several organizations that are like that are certified. So there's the ICF, and there's a couple of international groups. Yeah. I'm more bootstrap trained. So I combine 10 years of business knowledge with 15 years of psychology work, and with supervision from business people and industrial organizational psychologists. What an executive coach fundamentally is somebody who helps an executive understand the complexity of the world they're in and solve the problem of how do I be successful in this world. So there's no one type of coaching. I wrote an article 12 years ago called Different Strokes for Different Folks, meaning that you do different kinds of executive coaching in different situations. So if I'm coming into a new job, that's one type of executive coaching.
Okay.
If I'm getting prepared to take on more responsibility a year from now, that's called high potential coaching. That's different.
Okay.
And if I'm one of these guys or women who like is a great salesperson, but really alienates some of their colleagues, that's yet a different kind of coaching. So and then there's the fourth one is what I call executive consultation, which is working with a CEO or somebody in the C-suite who needs an independent voice, who needs somebody who doesn't have a stake in this game other than making them successful. So the answer is there are different kinds of coaching, but basically our job is to help people. Every executive has to think on multiple levels at the same time. They have to think strategically, organizationally, interpersonally, politically, emotionally, right?
Yeah.
And they have to figure out all of that stuff all the time. And usually most executives are good at some of them, but they're not good at all of them. And our job usually is to help them figure out the one that they're not as good at and solve some of those problems. So that's
awesome.
How I think of it.
I love it. What's a normal engagement? How often are you there with that executive? What does it look like?
So a typical executive coaching engagement is depending on 6 to 12 months. It's every couple weeks. Sometimes it's once a month, sometimes it's once a week, but usually it's a commitment. I tell people it's a commitment of about 40 to 50 hours on their part during the course of during 6 months, where they are devoted to talking to me, to learning about themselves, to learning about their environment, to understanding what their options are. And so whether it's developing emotional intelligence or political savvy or strategic thinking or organizational thinking, it's helping them it's challenging them to learn new skills and think differently about problems. The issue for most of my coaches, the people I coach, is not that they're not good at their day job, but it's that they've been put in a new job or a new challenging situation that they haven't experienced before. So they don't necessarily have experience to bring to that situation. And it's my job to help them think that through and solve those problems.
Where do you normally start?
Self-awareness is a number one.
I was wondering if you went to the self first.
You've got to build self-awareness. Okay. You've got to understand who you are, what your values are, what your personal mission is, what your strengths are, what your capabilities are, what your weaknesses are. Where you don't play well. So you got to really understand, where do I play well? Where do I not play well? And because people succeed fundamentally because of their strengths, right? They can fail because of their weaknesses, but they succeed because they do something or a couple of things really, really, really well. Like you obviously figured out that your skills in being a pilot and being that ability to see over the horizon and think down the road and anticipate and plan is incredibly valuable for you. And you took advantage of it, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine though, there's some people who it takes a long time to find that. Mm-hmm. And so part of coaching is being willing to learn those new things and take those new chances. And it was talking about it being a growth mindset is being willing to take on new things. So step number one, self-awareness. Step number two, understand the context. So it's you in the context of a team, in the context of an organization, right? And it's never about you. It's about, how do I deliver what the organization needs? How do I deliver what my boss needs? How do I deliver what my stakeholders need, my suppliers and vendors? And it's the second thing you got to do is understand what other people need from you, right? Mm-hmm. And once you know what other people need from you, then you can figure out how to get where you want to go, and by helping other people get where they want to go. So it's the concept of all boats rise on a rising tide. So if, having influence in an organization fundamentally means people think you're the go-to person who can get the job done, and who's always willing to take something on, who doesn't say, no, that's not my job, or
Right.
yeah, I got to go home, who's willing to take things on, and who thinks like us, who understands the world the way we do, right?
Well, that's a good point. Talk to me more about, because the idea of diversity of thought and just, diversity of people and all that kind of stuff. But this idea who thinks like us, why is that important?
Every organization has a culture. Yep. Just like every country has a culture, just like different parts of the US have different cultures. Everybody has a culture. I don't mean what color your skin or what religion you believe in. What I mean is, how do we decide things? How do we understand things? How do we communicate? When Americans try to communicate in Japanese corporations, they often have a very hard time, because we go into those situations thinking that that you discuss things and make decisions in meetings.
Right.
But in a lot of Japanese organizations, there's a ton of work that you have to do beforehand, of socializing an idea and getting people on board and understanding where their concerns are, so that when you walk into the meeting, it's 90% done.
Yeah.
Right. That's not necessarily how Americans work, but if you try to take an American model and apply it to a Japanese company, it's not going to work. Same thing. If I take startup culture, put it in a 200-year-old company, it's not going to work there either. And the same thing, if I've been at IBM for the past 30 years and I go and try and do a startup, that's going to be really tough, because that startup isn't going to want to follow the processes and systems that I think are absolutely critical to functioning.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit further, because I was just thinking to myself, okay, what is it in an organization that's, I'm trying to think of the right words. You said 200 years old, but established organization. What is that culture versus the entrepreneurial culture? Where's the clash? What's similar? What's different?
So there are a lot of factors in it. I think one of the major factors is risk tolerance. Okay. So when I'm an entrepreneur, when I'm in a startup mode, I have to be willing to take risks, because that's the only way you can grow. You can be successful and not take risks by doing the same thing over and over and over. There are lots of lawyers and accountants and stuff who do that, and they're very successful at it. Yeah. But if you want to grow a business, you have to be willing to take risks. If I'm a big, well-established business, I'm going to be trying to avoid loss. Yeah. Right. I'm going to try to avoid failure. It's exactly what happened to Blockbuster. It's exactly what happened to Kodak. Kodak gave away, Xerox gave away the graphical user interface. So what a Macintosh computer is. They developed that at Research Park in Palo Alto 40 years ago, didn't see an application of it, and thought it was a threat to what they already had. So they gave it away.
It's amazing. Hey, I'm going to Palo Alto Sunday. I live in Sun Valley. That's where I am today. Okay. But Palo Alto Networks, big company, you probably heard of them, have me come and speak to the board and their executive team. So I can't wait to go back, because I miss Palo Alto. But keep going with this idea, because I'm always trying to figure this out myself. You can see it, right? You can go in an entrepreneurial startup company and you feel a different energy. Absolutely. You go and so keep going with what your observations are.
So when you're in a entrepreneurial company, somebody comes to the CEO, says, I got an idea. Why don't we do this? That person says, you know what? Go for it. Or that's a dumb idea. Forget it. Right? The decision gets made and you move forward. If I'm in a $1 billion company, I have a 12-step stage gate process designed to make sure that we don't invest money badly in a new product that isn't going to be successful. But as a client of mine once said, there are 16 ways to say no to a project, and there's only one way to say yes.
Nice.
So, but
that's a good tagline. We're going to use that in the show notes. Go for it.
So those big established organizations, their job is to, number one, if I'm a publicly traded company, my job is number one, to predict to the street, to Wall Street, what it is that's going to happen, and have great deal of confidence that my prediction is going to be reasonably accurate, right? Wall Street hates unpredictability. So they want companies, if you say you're going to grow 8%, they don't want you growing 7% or 9%. They want you growing 8%. But that's you don't have that kind of thing in a startup culture. When you're an entrepreneur, it's like, if I can grow 30%, great. If I can grow 50%, great. Right? If I can grow 10%, not so good. Right. But I'm going to, so it's all about risk tolerance. It's all about empowering people to do things. So, but at the same time, expecting people to not set arbitrary boundaries. So, if you're an entrepreneur, the last line of every job description is, and whatever we need at the moment.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. I just put that in a contract again. Yeah.
Absolutely. When I had my own company, I would hire people and I'd say, here's your job description. Just remember, I may need you to make the coffee, clean the toilets, go to the bank, talk to a new customer. I'm going to, you have a job, but I'm going to need you to do a lot of different things because nobody here is specialized that much. And it's a very different culture than.
By the way, you met Greg Sugar Sugar. He's really good at that. He adapts anything you say, I'll find out, get it done. Right. So, you want those kinds of people that are adaptable, but also they need to have expertise too. So it's about it's two sides of the same coin.
The other thing that you want is you want people who can grow with you.
Yes.
Right? You're an entrepreneur. You don't want people who stop here and say, no further. You want people who are going to keep growing, keep taking on more responsibility, and be willing to engage in that process. And that's really important too.
Oh, I love that. And so what do you do when someone decides that, it's usually a subconscious decision, but how you're growing, your company's growing, and some people just like kind of what they have. So what do you do in that case?
Well, it depends on the company. So listen, we all, a lot of times you can make room for somebody who says, look, I just want to be a coder. I just want to write software code. I don't want to manage people. I don't want to be a leader. I just want to do this. And you can make room for those people as long as they're comfortable with the decision that they've made.
Okay.
Right. But you can't live with those people because you're growing and it becomes hard to find people. But in any organization, I find that there are people who play well in a certain size and who struggle when it gets to a larger size. So you do have to turn over people and bring in people. It's about process orientation. It's about risk tolerance. It's about communication skills. And then it becomes about leadership. Because leadership in a 10,000 person company or whatever it is very different than leadership of 200 people. So, and you see this, Sergey Brin, was brilliant at creating Google, but he couldn't run it in the same way that because that's a skill set that he didn't have.
Beautiful. It's interesting, back to my military time. I think it's interesting. The military has, where they came up with 3 years, I'm not sure, but that's the number. About every 3 years, you get reassigned, and it forces what you just said. And usually it's up too. You typically are being promoted, but not always. You could go lateral sometimes, but you're still going to go to a new piece of the organization. So you don't leave the Navy, even though sometimes you may do an exchange tour with somebody else. But the point is that there is this beautiful thirst to get reassigned and learn and grow, and a lot of companies have these beautiful leadership, high potentials programs, right? They get around. The military, that was standard, as long as you were willing to do it. Now you have to pick up your family, you have to go. Some people say, I don't want to do that. And that's a career choice, right? And it's okay. But I love that. And I love that because I grew up in that culture, both as a kid and in the military and now in an entrepreneurial startup, where I enjoy that thirst of learning, growing, knowing. And, sometimes in order to do that, you've got to get new thinking, new people, new excitement, new blood in the situation, while also having some process so that it continues, right? So I see those as I call it, the cadence of execution, right? Briefs, debriefs, right? I got to be prepared, I got to plan, I got to execute, but then I got to debrief and learn and grow on it. Awesome. Hey, let's flip. Let's just quickly go to another direction. That was brilliant. I love talking to you. Maybe the first thing I want to dive into is your book, okay? Because I know how important that is, right? Give me the top 3 takeaways from your book.
So the message of the book fundamentally is you get influence, as I said before, by being a can-do person who gets the job done and who understands us and operates the way we operate. You do that by knowing yourself, knowing your job, knowing the organization, and be really clear about those things. And then asking yourself the question, does who I am fit with who the organization is, right? And what the organization needs from me. And if those things fit together, you're sweet. So then you create a development plan, you decide what you need to do to get that job done exactly right, 100%. And then you start putting your hand up and you ask for more, right? If those things don't match, then you got 2 choices. You can try to fit in, which is never going to work very well. Or you can decide maybe it's the right company, but the wrong job. Or maybe it's the wrong company or the wrong place. Yeah. And if you're in the wrong place, start looking for another job. One of the things that I see that pains me is when somebody at some level knows they're not in the right job, that this is not the right place for them, but they keep trying to make it work and trying to make it work. And it makes them miserable and they're unhappy. They're not successful. They're not getting what they want. And in those cases, what I try to do is help them see that they should be doing something else that makes them happy, that fulfills them, that takes advantage of their strengths. Sometimes that's because of a manager. Sometimes it's because of an organizational values. And sometimes it's just, I'm in a job that doesn't take advantage of my strengths. If I'm an entrepreneurial personality and I'm in a staid organization that doesn't want me innovating and making changes and stuff, I'm going to get frustrated, right? So put yourself in a situation where you can be innovative and you're going to be much happier about that. And that's scary for a lot of people, but it's what they need to do. So know yourself, know your organization, understand the fit, and then either accelerate because of that fit or consider options. That's influence is all about people. I hear people talk all the time about, I want a seat at the table. I want that position of authority. Well, the first thing you got to do is do your job really well, right? You can't get promoted if you're not delivering 100% of what you need, what your company needs, and what your boss needs. And you can't start asking for more. You can't be a thought leader. You can't have executive presence if you're not doing your job. Yeah. And that's the piece that a lot of people skip over, right? Is getting it right.
That's so brilliant. I think back to Bill Belichick, his 3 famous quotes, right? Do your job first, then become world-class at it, and then teach someone else. That's his quotes. I love it, because that's exactly what we did in the Blues and in the military. Is first, there was a learning process. You had to learn how to fly. You had to learn how to use weapon systems. So first thing is, do your job. Don't hurt anybody else, kind of like doctors, and then become good at something, right? But that's not enough. You have to then transition to be an instructor, and to teach. And then comes the leadership piece, after that. So it was this constant growth and learning. Hey, tell me real quick. Go ahead. You're about to say something. Go for it.
I was gonna, what I find as a coach is that a lot of times people are only doing a part of the job, right? They're doing, maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 80%, but they're either particularly when they're under pressure, they start doing their old job, the things they know.
Yeah.
They start doing the things that they want, that they wish they had. So they start trying to be a thought leader before they become good at what they do. I had one client who she came in as the head of digital marketing, and almost immediately she tried to become the chief marketing officer. And the CEO kept saying to her, no, you can't be chief marketing officer. Fix digital first. Then we'll get you another, we'll consider the options. And she kept going back, and she kept trying to do other parts of the marketing job, and she kept trying to do other things. And it just pissed off her boss, and it pissed off her colleagues, because she was focused on what she wanted, not what she had.
Nice.
Right. And the third thing is that people do what they need to do to avoid anxiety. So people, I had another guy who went from leading a team of 8, he got promoted to leading a floor of 200 people.
Okay.
And so big jump. And all of a sudden he was thrown into being asked questions and given reports and given materials that he didn't understand.
Right.
And he started panicking. And so what he did, until I came on the scene to help him, was he started going back and doing his old job, right? He wasn't focused on the new job. He was doing what he had done before, because it reduced his anxiety. So I was able to help him understand that sometimes when you got a new job, you don't know the techniques, but they put you there for a reason. So what's the reason, right? Because you have some skills and some knowledge and some expertise that they think will be valuable. So it's, so people, and when they don't do what they're supposed to do, that's where they derail. That's when they get off track. So I spend a fair amount of time helping people think about, okay, what's exactly the right thing for me to be doing, and focus on that and let go of the other stuff.
Oh, that's good. That's really good. Hey, tell me about Sandy. So Sandy, what can we learn from her?
Which one's Sandy? Remind me about Sandy.
Yeah, I'm not sure. This was Greg told me, he says, hey, got to ask this question. Tell me more about Sandy, one of Bill's most interesting clients.
So, okay. So part of the reason why I don't remember Sandy is because I changed all the names.
It's in the book.
Yeah. So yeah, I had to change names and change companies, but I know who Sandy is. Sandy was trying to, came into an organization, and she was in technology, and she was doing a really good job at the technology work, but it had become kind of a treadmill. It became sort of routine. And so she was focused on keeping her team doing what they were doing. But what it turned out was that she wasn't focused. What her boss wanted her to be focused on is what's next, not what's today. And she was too busy focused on today to think about what's next. So what she did, what I helped her figure out was, how do you organize your world so that you're not responsible for the day? And that's delegation. So she wasn't a good delegator when we started. So I said, give your people, you have 4 people who are responsible for different parts of your organization. Give the work to them. Tell them they're responsible for getting it done. And she looked at me and she said, then what's my job? And I said, Your job is to figure out what's up tomorrow. And so we cleared out her space, her mental space. We cleared out her desk. And all of a sudden she was able to start thinking about, well, I'm a technologist. What's going to happen in 5 years to this organization? And she wrote this white paper because she had the time to do it, gave it to her boss. She got promoted twice in 2 years because of that.
Wow. Well, you know, keep going.
No, she went from being managing a group of about 40 people to managing a team of 1,500 people.
Wow.
In 3 years, because she stopped trying to do other people's job and really focused on what her job was.
Well, I was going to ask you, here's where I was just thinking about what makes a coach successful. That was my next question. And so answer that. Sandy rolled you into it, but go for it.
So coaches are successful when they find the one lever that will make a difference for that person. Because we can focus on, I think the most skilled coaches understand that they can help people at different places in that world. Remember, I talked about the world of that you have to think about structurally, strategically, organizationally, politically, emotionally. You have to think about all those things at the same time. Well, you got to pick one of them, because one of them is a place you want to help that person. And that can make a huge difference. So the best coaches are able to say, we're going to fix that piece. We're going to work on that detail. And, the other thing that the best coaches do is they understand that sometimes you need to listen. Sometimes you need to ask really good questions. Sometimes you need to help people think of options. And every once in a while, you need to tell them what to do. And a lot of coaches are trained never to tell anybody what to do.
Good point.
But the most senior executives, they're hiring you for your expertise. They're hiring you because you know something they don't. And if you don't use that expertise, you're not giving them all the benefit that you can really give them.
Oh, that's brilliant. I'm so glad I asked you. How about the reverse side of that question? And that is, how do you know and what do you do when you're not able to help them?
So self-knowledge, I said, what you asked me, where do I go first with my coach, with the people I'm coaching? And I said, self-awareness. I have to have self-awareness. I have to know what I know and know what I don't. And I have to be comfortable saying to a CEO who's paying me a lot of money, I don't know the answer to that. Let's figure out who does. And to be comfortable in myself and know that that's not that I don't have to know everything. I just have to be good at some things, and that's what I'm there for. And a lot of coaches get caught up in, well, I have to be everything for my clients. I have to be able to solve all their problems, or I can't solve any of their problems. And so you can't get stuck in those two extremes. You have to be somewhere in the middle where I can help you with some stuff and I can help you figure out what to do with other stuff.
Man, I love it. I know this next question, and just be brutally honest if you can, because it's a wide spectrum. You said CEOs pay you a lot of money. What's the scale on coaching? How do you, and I'm doing this for myself, I want to learn. So how do you price oneself? And just give me a rough idea.
Well, I can't really answer the question because it varies dramatically by industry. It varies dramatically by region. So what people charge in New York City and in Palo Alto is very different than what they charge in St. Louis, right? Just because of but it's also because of the nature of the business. Manufacturing businesses have much smaller margins than software technology companies or banking companies, right? So they can afford more, so that it varies there. I've seen people charge $100 a session. I've seen people charge $100,000 for a coaching engagement.
Wow.
So there's a huge range. And I think the answer is you got to figure out who your market is, what the competition's doing, and benchmark your fees against what the competition's doing, and decide whether you want to be, do you want to be the least cost player, so you get the business for people who don't want to spend a lot of money, or do you want to be the expert, and play at the top of the house? And in that case, you're charging more money. So I think it really depends on how you frame your business.
Yeah, it's really any business, right? Not just coaching. You know, where do you want to play? Hey, what is the Forbes? We're wrapping up here, but what is the Forbes Coaches Council? What is that, and how did you get there?
So the Forbes Coaches Council is an invitation-only sort of expertise group that's formed by Forbes, and they have a bunch of these besides coaching. But for coaching, it's people who have established businesses, established experience, have a reputation for being a particular type of coach, and can bring that expertise to contribute to the world through Forbes. So it's a group of about 500, 600 coaches globally who do different kinds. Some are executive coaches, some are presentation coaches, some are marketing coaches. Some, it varies depending on what they do, but we're all experts in our field. And so it's, you get opportunities to provide advice, to provide answers to questions, to write articles, and it's all tied into Forbes.
Got it. Well, for my audience, you are one of those, and that's says a lot that your peers have selected you for that. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it with two important questions. The first one is just about gratitude. Okay, and where does gratitude and this idea of glad to be here, where does that play in your world? What you've seen out there? How important is it?
I love that question, because one of the two best predictors of life satisfaction and happiness is gratitude. So being grateful is incredibly important. For being grateful about yourself and being grateful about the people around you is incredibly important for every leader, right? It's very easy to always be looking at who's got more than you or who's better than you, but you really have to be grateful on a regular basis for the people you got and for for what you've accomplished, because there are lots of people who are not doing as well. But I have to tell you, I'm most grateful for the people who work for me. They are wonderful people, and they make me, today is, there was an article this morning about the benefits of a good executive assistant. And I had to retweet it or, share it. And I said, EAs are worth their weight in gold. And I thank every day for the executive assistant I have, who's just wonderful.
Hey, do me a favor, send that to me and I'll retweet it, because I'm actually hiring an EA right now. So let's talk about that real quick. We're in a search for an EA. What's the key to a good EA, and how do you go about hiring that?
Well, if you can find one that's a good mind reader, that's the best trick. Okay. But short of that, it's they want to take care of you, so they understand your value, particularly for a unique contributor like you. They are not afraid of you, so they're willing to tell you, don't do that, go do this. Right. Mm-hmm. So they're assertive, they're confident, they're detail oriented, and they are absolutely willing to learn. And the trick for you is that you spend the time right up front teaching them how to read your mind, right? Helping them to get to know you well enough so that they know your strengths, they know your faults, they know what you need, they know what you want. So, and that takes time. Yeah. For the first 6 months I had my current EA, we would meet for 20 minutes every morning, and then 20 minutes at the end of the day. And we would talk about stuff, because at that point, she didn't know who my clients were. She didn't know how I like to work. So I had to teach her how I liked. And if you invest in that time with your EA, that it's going to reward you tenfold.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. What are there any, thank you for that. I'll put that to action. Any life lessons, mantras, quotes that you live your own personal life by that you'd like to share with everybody? What are the ones that are meaningful to you?
So 15 years ago, my co-author, George Bratt, asked me what my purpose was. Yeah. And I kind of said, huh? And he talked to me about his purpose. And I thought about it for a long time. And my purpose is about helping people to become what they're capable of being. Right. And I did that as a therapist. I did that as a teacher. And I do that as a coach. And I do it as a businessman. My job is to help other people be their best self. And I also want to learn every day. So that's my mantra, is help people be what they can capable of being.
Oh, I love that. Hey, what'd you learn today, Bill? What'd you learn in this podcast?
Well, first of all, I learned that there's a really impressive guy who's doing amazing things that with corporations, bringing super performing teams to corporate world. So it's great to meet you. And I learned a lot about what it's like to be in the military and to bring that expertise and to live the stuff that we talk about. So that was a great lesson for me.
Awesome. Let me go. I learned just how dang smart you are about life skills and organizational skills, putting those both together. I learned a lot about coaching. You know, you hear about coaching all the time, but talking to someone like yourself who really gets it, right, and has the plan, you confirm that you start with self-awareness first, right?
Yeah.
And that really that stuck with me. So I'm very grateful of that. And I'm just grateful we had you on the podcast. How can people get a hold of you? How can we make you, I know the new book's out. Tell me, what do they do?
So go to my website, www.bermanleadership.com. And you can get to the book there. You can see my blog posts. You can get to me on Facebook as Bill Berman or Berman Leadership Development. I'm on Twitter as Dr. Bill Berman, Dr. Bill Berman. And those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
Awesome. We'll make sure those get in the show notes, but I also want people to know how to get you. All right. I meant to ask a lot earlier, but I want to just razz you a little bit. So you got such East Coast cachet, right? I mean, we're talking, you've worked on Cape Cod, you've got your bachelor's from Yale, you got your Ph.D, no, Harvard, yeah, right? And then Ph.D from Yale. So you are one of these, you work with the quant guys in New York. I mean, you're the quintessential East Coast just guru, right? And I'm kind of more the California, kind of laid back, a little bit different. So tell me, I heard once this saying, everyone should live in New York once, but leave before you get too hard. And everyone should live in California once, but leave before you get too soft. So just the tee up question. Tell me about East Coast, West Coast from your perspective.
Well, what's interesting is I've learned that I think the West Coast can be just as tough as the East Coast, particularly LA. But people in San Francisco also, but I think they know how to chill better than we do.
What does that mean?
I think you guys are better at like stepping away from it when it's time to step away. And we're like always on the go and we're always going. So it's just, it's balance. I think West Coast people are a little more balanced than East Coast.
Well, I think, that's why we're a great nation, right? It takes everything, right?
Absolutely.
And everybody is contributing beautifully. Hey, thanks, Bill. This really was a joy for me. Super, super pleased. I learned a lot, and I hope it helps you and your business a lot because you're making a big difference in people's lives.
I love talking with you. Thanks for having me on. It's been a great experience. And if I can help you with the coaching, let me know. I'm happy to help out.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll connect. Glad to be here. Thank you, Bill.
Take care. Thanks.